To be here and share the rest of the afternoon with us, talking about recruiting objections. I'm Matt Vi. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. And Dr. Ben is here with me in the, of course, in the studio, and he's manning the chat in case anybody has any questions. He can make sure he brings the questions to the conversation. We're excited, like I said, for you to be here today. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but we're focusing as part of the Master Recruiting Series on how to handle objections or overcoming objections. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. But overall, big picture, here's what we're going to make sure that we accomplish today. We're going to talk about recruiting, not just objections, but we're going to make sure we hit on some other things to make sure you get the maximum amount of value of sharing the upcoming hour with us. We're also going to talk about things that can impact productivity strategy for the agents that you do hire. We're going to touch on that just a little bit and how that correlates with handling objections when you're recruiting someone, because yes, that's all related. And then overall, we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about profitability. Okay. So again, super excited that you're all here. If you would just take a second, put your first name and where you're located actually in the chat. If you've got any questions or any specific objections you want to make sure that we go over that come up very often in recruiting, you can also put those in the chat, and Dr. Ben will make sure that he gets those over to me. Okay. Now I've mentioned a couple of times, myself, Matt, the big guy, as we call it from the podcast. Dr. Ben and I are co-host of course, Brokers Open podcast for real estate agents, but also the Brokerpreneur podcast. Like I mentioned, we're going to make sure, just like we do with the podcast, that we talk about recruiting strategies and retention and things that are going to make it as much as possible worth your while for you to spend the rest of your afternoon with us. As I mentioned, Dr. Ben, the Doctor of Flow, is also in the chat with us, and he's going to make sure that he helps. He's going to make sure that he helps us out. Okay. So what we're going to, the agenda for today, what we're actually going to talk really specifically about is we're going to make sure that we go over to through our culture of growth. Okay. And so we're going to make sure that we discuss that, and we're going to talk about how to get your agents involved. Okay. Of course, we're going to talk about objection handlers. We're going to make sure that we're going to discuss how all that's related to actual agent attraction, getting the agents that you actually want, getting attention from them. And then, of course, we're going to answer any questions that you have that are specific questions related to what it is that we're talking about. And of course, we'll like I said, we'll dig into all that in just a second. So you've probably, if you've listened to the podcast, or if you're connected with us through LinkedIn or through YouTube or one of the other social platforms, there's a couple of things that you probably know about us, but let's make sure that we say it out loud in case this is your first time attending a live event for us. We have live events on a regular basis. We have masterminds on a regular basis with brokers from across the country. Friday is Brokerpreneur Not So Secret Society, absolutely free. We'd love for you to attend that. I'll show you how to get registered for that later if you're interested. But one of the things that you hear from us on a very consistent basis is that the first thing that an agent should receive from you is value. So when they get connected with you through whatever platform they get connected, or whatever system or whatever way they get connected, the first thing they should get is a feeling of value from you. But the first thing they should experience is a culture of growth. An agent doesn't want to be part of a company that is not a growth-minded company. They want to see that if they're trying to grow and expand their business, that they want to be around other people that look at it that same exact way. So whatever you're doing, whatever recruiting system you're using, we love it if you're systemized, because of course, remember, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Whatever system you're using, make sure that it's focused on those two things. Those have to be the fundamental parts of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. We'll tell you a little bit more in just a second how to put that together. But again, the first thing they should receive is value, and the first thing they should experience is a culture of growth. Okay. So when you're doing that on a regular basis, that helps with agent attraction. The other thing that helps with agent attraction is making sure that whenever you're having conversations with agents, that you're doing something that we refer to all the time, which is renting space in their head. Okay. And what that means is Agents, just like in the real estate business, there's now and there's future business. Well, whenever it comes to agents moving from one brokerage to another, there's some agents that whenever you connect with them, man, they're going to want to move right away. The reality is most agents don't want to move right away. The reality is most agents have to go through the process of figuring out, one, do they want to move? And then two, where do they actually want to move to? That's where you have to really understand your system and how it attracts agents and how you're truly looking at what you think attraction is. A lot of people think, well, if I make my culture great enough, then everybody's going to want to be there and all the agents are going to knock down my door and they're all going to want to be part of it. There are some brokerages that accomplish that. Most brokerages, that's a little bit out of reach. Most brokerages, that's not going to be the case for them to rely on that to get the type of growth that they want. Instead, what they have to do whenever they're attracting agents, they have to look at it like this. If they have a good enough connection with the agent, when the time comes that the agent is willing to make a decision, they have to have rented space in that person's head until that point. So if you've got a great relationship, if you've delivered a lot of value, if they know that your office is focused on growth, then when something happens, they decide they want to make a move, they decide they want to transition to a different brokerage, or they're not happy with the brokerage they're at anymore, or they feel like they want to take it to a different place or a different level. That's whenever, if you're renting space in their head, it allows you to be that one that at some point you look at it like you attracted them, but the truth is you just rented space in their head until the point that they were ready to make a decision. So when we talk about agent attraction, absolutely, there's a small group of brokers that have the ability of being able to, from a culture standpoint, being able to attract people to them and not have to recruit, because it's just something that's going to naturally happen. Most brokerages, that's just simply not the case. What you're going to have to do is you're going to have to make connections with people, deliver value to them. Once you've delivered value to them and explained and helped them understand that you've got a culture of growth, you have to rent space in their head until the point that they are ready to make that decision. So absolutely go after the right now agents, try to make give them the opportunity to join your brokerage, but your focus, if you really want agent attraction, if you really want long-term growth, if you really want recruiting to be a system, you have to focus on putting it together in a way that you're focusing on those future transitions to your brokerage. Not just the now, but the future transitions. That's where agent attraction really comes into play. Now, of course, as you do that, some of what's going to happen is you're going to have to handle some objections. Okay. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about this in depth in just a second, but you'll notice that, whenever we put the information out there, we talk about how to overcome objections. The reality is what we're really doing is we're handling the objections or educating through the objections. We'll talk a little bit more about that, like I said, in just a second. Think about the word overcome for just a minute. Whenever you talk about overcoming things, there's a lot of times that people have a connotation with overcoming something that is not necessarily a positive connotation. It also sometimes means creating more conflict. We'll talk more about that later. So we want to be careful when we look at objections as something that we want to overcome versus something that we want to handle or educate through. Okay, I promise we'll get a little bit more to that a little bit later today. Before we do all that, we've got to talk a little bit about some rules, okay? Because we need to have some rules to play by to make sure that the environment is the type of environment that's going to be the most conducive for you to get the results from this that you want. That means we've got 4 rules whenever we're running an experiential type mastermind like this one. So the first rule is this is a collaborative environment, not a competitive environment. Okay, so we love it if you raise your hand, if you want to put things in the chat, if you want questions brought forward that we want to talk about, we absolutely love that. But remember, this isn't a competitive environment. This is a collaborative environment. Number 2, we're all licensed. And so that means, I think we're all realtors. So that means that we have to abide by code of ethics. So please make sure that whenever you're in the chat, or if you're raising your hand, or if you're contributing to the conversation, that we always keep in mind that we have to abide by code of ethics. Number 3 is this is being recorded. Okay. And so that means that sometimes we use clips from this from other courses that we have. We use clips from this to go on social media. We use clips from this in our masterminds that we have for our current clients. There's a lot of different pieces and parts and ways that we use this information. So just know, and we appreciate the consent of you being part of this and allowing us to share your experience with other people that this is going to positively impact. And number 4 is if you have any questions, if you have any comments, of course, you can go over to the chat, just reach out to Dr. Ben, whatever questions and comments and everything that you have, we'll make sure that they come to the recording so that we can have a conversation with those, and so that everybody can get the most out of the time that they spend together with us today. Okay. So let's talk for just a second about objections. We'll dig into this just a little bit. Specifically on one type of objection, the one that so my belief is, from my experience coming up on 25 years being in the business, that whenever it comes to recruiting objections, there's really only about 11 of them. Okay, now there's different variations. There's probably an unlimited number of variations of all of those, but there's probably only about 11 of them whenever it really boils down to it. All of those 11, the good news is, fall into 4 categories. And so if you keep in mind which category, if you ask enough questions and you actively listen well enough, you're going to have the opportunity to see which of those 4 categories that the actual objection falls into, which is going to show you how to leverage the methodology that we're talking about in order to overcome, or in order to handle, or in order to educate through that particular objection. Okay, depending on how you look at how you want to approach it. Okay, the one that we're going to talk about specifically today, and I'll explain a little bit more why in just a second, is, my commission split is better than your commission split, or my commission plan is better than the commission plan that you have, or your fees are too high, something along that line, when it comes specifically to a money conversation. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to dig into today. But just know that, from a big picture standpoint, there really is probably, like I said, there's 11 of them that the rest of them fall into the categories of. Okay, so there is looking at dealing with objections, there is there's some rules to it that you have to keep in mind. Okay. And one of the rules, I've kind of touched on this just a little bit, but what I want you to keep in mind is, try not to overcome the objection. When people try to overcome the objection, what that means is that they're trying to take that objection and they're trying to sideline it, or say that it's not worthy, or say that it's something that just has to be dealt with, or you don't understand well enough, and so I have to overcome the way that you're thinking about it. We just want to make sure that we don't take that approach whenever we're dealing with the objection. So do we need to work through it? Absolutely. Do we need to handle it? Absolutely, we need to handle it. The best way to do it, of course, is to educate your way through it. And what I mean by educate your way through it is, if you're having conversations with someone and you can have collective conversations with them that help them get past what a lot of the common objections would be, then when the time comes for them to tell you why they would or would not join your brokerage, you can refer back to, and you have almost that "I told you so" moment with them. And so an example of that would be, you're talking to someone, you're at an open house, one of your agents is holding an open house, and you're standing there, and a couple of agents walk up, and you're walking through the house looking around, and one of the other agents walks over and says, "Hey, you're Matt, right? You're with Matt's Realty." And you say, "Yeah, absolutely. It's super nice to meet you. I'm just here to, show a little support to my agent, Dr. Ben." And they were like, "Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic." Then you say, "So which brokerage are you with?" And they say, I'm with this brokerage." "Oh, that's a fantastic brokerage." And you have a great conversation with them, and you can tell that the conversation starts turning into a recruiting conversation, because they say things like, "Well, tell me a little bit more about your brokerage," or, I've been thinking about taking a look at other opportunities in the market." They're saying things along that line. At that point, it's great for you to get the appointment set with them, but it's also great to handle what would be some of the objections that are going to come up. Now, that doesn't mean that you start spewing out all the things that you do from a company standpoint. At that point, you'd say, "Well, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about it, because there's a couple of things that come up, specifically related to, how we generate business, and our cost and fee structures, and, what training and business development we offer, and also, a little bit more about our culture. I'd love to spend just a few minutes talking about those things, because a lot of the agents I have discussions with about that have a preconceived notion And then once we sit down, they learn a little bit more about what we do, and they realize that we probably could be a good fit for them. Can we? Is there time next week we could sit down? So what that's saying is, I understand that you might have some concerns about some of those different parts of the business. So do other people, but I'm able to help other people understand our perspective, and they still make a good decision and join our company. What that's doing is that's educating them through that process. What that's doing is that's helping them before those things come up. It's helping them so that we move, so that we handle that objection, or so that we educate through that instead of trying to overcome it. Okay, and that all boils down to you being the authority in the conversation as early as possible. So the first thing that we want to do whenever we're working through the whatever objections we're running into is we want to make sure that we know what the actual objection is. And what I mean by that is, sometimes we hear things in conversations and we have a little bit of a preconceived notion maybe of what somebody means. And so we ask them about their business, or about their history or their background, or why are they excited about doing what they do in real estate. And our role at that point is to be as active of a listener as possible. That way, whenever whatever comes up, if some type of objection does come up, it's easy for us to confirm what that objection actually is. We want to not have a preconceived notion. Very recently, I had one of our clients was in a coaching session. We had a mastermind, and something came up, and they were going to make a couple of decisions with a couple of their agents on how to move forward with a team relationship that they had. And so we got on a coaching call to talk a little bit about it. And whenever we got on the coaching call, we discussed through what it was that they were going to talk about that evening in the meeting with the other agents they were going to meet with. And I urged the broker a couple of times. I said, make sure that whenever you're having this conversation with them, that you're actively listening, and that what their main issue is, that instead of you feeling like you understand what their main issue is, make sure that you have a very good idea of exactly what it is that they're trying to accomplish, so that you can confirm it with them. But you need to do that by having asked questions that brought that to a head at least 3 times. We call that going 3 deep whenever you're trying to get to the bottom of an objection. That way, whenever you confirm the objection, you know that it's the actual one that needs to be dealt with in order for them to move forward. What that does is that allows you to isolate that objection. Okay. Here's what I mean by isolating that objection. You ask somebody a question, they say, yes, I'd like to, I'm thinking seriously about joining your brokerage. And you say, well, what would stop us from working together? And they say, oh, well, it's the commission plan. And you start to address the commission plan without really having confirmed what they mean by the commission plan. Okay. And so you say, well, our commission plan is really competitive, and I'm very familiar with the commission plan that you're at, and this is how much savings you'll get, and this is how much money you're going to be able to put in your pocket, and this is what your long-term projection would look like, compared to just your next couple of transactions. What they might have actually meant was, I'm planning on selling my own property, and I don't know what your compensation plan is. I have 4 rental properties that I'm planning on selling. And because you assumed that you knew what was going on, or because I've done this before, because I assumed I knew what was going on with them asking a question about compensation plans, and then I start to explain the benefits of my plan instead of explaining how my plan solves the problem that they have. What ended up happening is I talked about something that was not necessarily giving them the answer that they wanted. So that's why we have to ask that question. Well, tell me a little bit more about our compensation plan. What worries you? And they say, well, I've got a couple of my own properties. And you say, okay, great. Let me talk to you specifically about how our compensation plan works when it comes to buying and selling your own properties. And at the end of that, of course, you can, if there's an objection, we'll talk about how to overcome that in just a second. So what that allows you to do is it allows you to confirm it and then isolate it. So one of the things that you want to make sure that you get in the habit of saying whenever you're dealing with what you think is going to be an objection, you need to ask them, is this the only thing that would keep us from working together? Is this the final thing that would keep us from working together? Can you think of anything else that would keep us from working together? What we're doing at that point is we're making sure that anything that we need to address, we're addressing right then, because what's going to happen a lot of times is when you say that, they're going to say, well, no, there's a couple of other things. And you say, well, let's talk about that. And what you're going to notice is the 2 or 3 other things that they're talking about ultimately really boil down to one thing. And so what you want to make sure that you do is you want to make sure that you isolate whatever it is that would stop them from moving forward, with you. And then, of course, the next thing that we want to do is we want to affirm, and not just confirm, but we want to affirm with them that whatever that objection is. So as an example, I'm talking to somebody, and let's go back to the example of, they say that, the commission plan might not be a good fit for me. And you ask the question, say, well, tell me a little bit more about that. I want to make sure that I understand what you mean by that. And they say, well, I've got several, of my own properties that I'm going to need to sell over the next 12 to 24 months. And I just don't know how that will all work. And you say, I understand. If we can kind of figure that out, is there anything else that you think we would need to talk about or get to the bottom of before, we could talk seriously about working together? And they say, no, that really is my main concern. At that point, if you jump into the solution, it sounds like you're defending what it is that you do. Instead of that, make sure that you are on the same side as them. Make sure that you affirm. And what I mean by that is you would say something along the line of, I completely understand. That is a lot of money. If you've got several properties that you're going to sell, that's a lot of money to be concerned about. I would want to make sure that I got to the bottom of that as well. That's why I'm going to make sure before we leave today that you feel comfortable with how my company would deal with that situation for you. So at that point, what you're doing is you're not just saying, hey, I understand what you're talking about. Hey, is there anything else we need to talk about? But you're also saying that is a valid point, and we need to make sure that you feel comfortable with that before we move on to whatever else it is that we move on to and make a decision about you actually joining my company. Then, of course, what we're going to do is we're going to offer the solution, right? We're actually going to try to solve that situation for them. We're going to try to get to the bottom of it. And so the good news is, I mentioned this before, there's 4 main categories for those 11 main objections. In those 4 categories, okay, the key that we want to make sure that we focus on is, if you understand and you really have confirmed and you really have isolated with them, and you figured out which category, and I'll talk about the categories in just a second. If you figure out which category that objection falls into, then you're going to have a single dialogue that you can have that will help you overcome or handle or solve, however you want to look at it, that will help you deal with or educate through that actual objection. So what I'm saying is there's really only 4 main things that you're going to have to remember from a dialogue standpoint in order to overcome any objection that you run into with a real estate agent that's contemplating joining your company. Okay. And we'll talk about that in just a second whenever we dig a little bit more into exactly how we solve it. And then, of course, we want to make sure that we finalize. Okay. And what I mean by finalize is, a lot of people call it closing. Okay. The reason why I use the word finalize is because, I want to make sure everything is wrapped up. Before I had someone join my brokerage, I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable with what was happening. They understood what was happening, and that we had moved past. So we basically had a commencement, an end of one thing and a beginning of another thing, which means we had to finalize all their concerns, all the things that they were worried about, how their transition was going to work, all of those things. I wanted to finalize those as much as possible, so that way they could feel like they were starting new. They were moving in the direction that they wanted to be moving in. Okay. So you can call it a close, or you can call it, something being finalized, however you want to handle it, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Okay. Dr. Ben, how's it going in the chat over there? Everything good?
Yeah, everybody. 4 or 5 people in here. We got some people in Florida, some people in Georgia.
Good. Good. Love it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about the solution first. Okay, so I think we've got a pretty good idea what confirm is and isolate, and confirm, isolate, and affirm. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about solving it. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to use something called a BANT methodology in order to solve the problem for them. Okay. So if you look at any type of objection handling, you're going to come across something called BANT, and BANT is an acronym, and it's budget, authority, need, and timeline, or timing, depending on where you look. But I put another T on the end of that, and the other T on the end of that for me is trust. Okay, I think that if you handle the objection the way that you need to, if you overcome or educate through that objection the way that you need to, what's going to end up happening is you're going to build trust with that person. You're going to establish yourself as an authority, but you're going to build trust with them in a way that allows them to feel more comfortable with what it is that you are helping them do with their business and their career going forward. Okay. So we talked in a couple of times through, the examples that we've had so far about the objection being centered around money. Okay. So your company charges too many fees, or it's more expensive where I'm at, or I like to charge the amount of money that, I like to be able to charge whatever commission I want to be able to charge. And your company doesn't do that. There's a lot of different things that are centered around being able to focus on the budget side of what it is that people are trying to accomplish with their business. Okay. And what I mean by that is, when people start talking about finances, you have to remember that what they're really talking about is they're trading their time for money, and that money is buying a lifestyle for them and their family. When they start talking about money, please don't ever forget that's what's actually happening. Now, sometimes it's easy for people to look at it as a company and say, okay, I'm a company. I want to make money. You're an agent in a company and you're wanting to make money. And what we're both trying to do is keep as much or split the money, however we need to split it, so that I can run my company my way and you can run your company your way. If you're trying to handle objections that are centered around money and you only look at it from that perspective, then your answer is only appealing to certain personalities. What you have to make sure that you're doing is you're looking at, from a big picture standpoint, all the things that you're trying to accomplish, and with all the different personalities. And the best way to make sure that you're handling that the way that needs to be handled is by talking about them being able to provide the lifestyle that they want through the career that they've chosen. Because whether there's somebody that wants to do 20 transactions a year, whether there's somebody that wants to do 2,000 transactions a year, they are focused on the lifestyle that they'll gain from doing that amount of work. So what we have to do is, as we're going through and having a conversation with them about what they're saying their objective is, we cannot get far from the fact that it is about their lifestyle, not just about what hits their bank account. We have to make sure that we keep both of those in mind, but we have to make sure that ultimately it really is about the lifestyle that they're trying to lead. So if you would, for just a second, write a couple of things down, and just I'll give you a way that you can get this information in just a second if you miss anything. But so here's what we're going to do to deal with this specific objection. One is thank you. 2 is compare, don't contrast. 3 is not asking for a decision. 4 is trade their low value for your high value. And then 5 is you're not setting an appointment with them, you're sharing something with them. Okay, so let me go through those one more time so that you can make sure that you've got them written down. Through this dialogue, we're gonna have a thank you, and we're gonna compare, not contrast. We're not asking for a decision from them. You're going to trade their low value for your high value. And then of course, we're not asking for an appointment. We're asking for the opportunity to share some information with them. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through this. And what I've done is I've created a script that you'll have access to. And so a script is an exact phraseology that you use to be able to have a conversation framed with the way that you want, based on your practicing of it. Okay. A dialogue, which is where most of you should be from a broker standpoint. A dialogue is instead of remembering the exact words of everything that goes on in a script, a dialogue is a general conversation that you use to shape the specifics of what you're talking, because you're actively listening, to shape the specifics of what you're talking to people about. Okay. So what I'm going to do, the part that I just gave you, the thank you, the compare, don't contrast, the not asking for a decision, the trade, the low value for high value, and the not an appointment, the sharing, those are all dialogue items. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to share a really specific script with you. Okay. And so what I want you to keep in mind is, let's say that, we're falling into the budget category. Okay. Because they're talking about money or they're talking about finances, and they've said your commission split is too high, or your fees are too much, or I don't want to pay a franchise fee, or whatever the objection happens to be. Okay. Your per transaction fee is too high, or I only pay this much, or I don't want a monthly fee, or whatever it is. Right. So the way that you handle this is, thanks for your candidness, especially when it comes to something as important as your take-home pay. Just like you as an agent in the marketplace, my company being as competitive as possible is critical. Since you're happy with where you are, I'd never ask you to make a financial decision that's going to negatively impact you or your family. I'll tell you what, if you spend 10 minutes with me sharing with me why you love your compensation plan, I'll tell you the top 3 ways that my productive agents generate leads. Do you have time Tuesday for me to share that with you? Okay, so let me go back through and read this again, but this time I'm going to break it down just a little bit into, because that's a specific script, I'm going to break it down into the dialogue points I gave you just a minute ago. Okay, so it starts off with, thank you for your candidness, especially when it comes to something as important as your take-home pay. That really is the thank you part of this. Okay, so that's where we kind of started on this. Okay, and then we go into, just like you as an agent in the marketplace, my company being as competitive as possible is critical. So what that's saying is, you run a business and you try to be competitive. Me running a business, I try to be competitive. I'm comparing with you right now. Although you just told me, Mr. and Miss Agent, that my compensation plan didn't fit, or you tried to draw a line in the sand and say that we're at contrast here. What I'm doing instead is I'm trying to draw a comparison between us. You have the right to be successful. I have the right to be successful. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to pull us back together at that point, even though they're trying to separate us. Just like you as an agent in the marketplace, being as competitive as possible is critical. So the next thing is not asking for a decision, right? Since you're happy where you are, and I would never ask anyone to make a financial decision that would negatively impact their family. So what that's saying is, I'm not asking you to make a decision on this. I love it that you're happy where you're at, and I don't want to ask you to do anything that's going to negatively impact what you're trying to accomplish with your family. Oh, I'll tell you what. If you spend 10 minutes with me sharing with what you love about your compensation plan, I will tell you the top 3 ways my productive agents generate leads. So now what I've done is I've went from, okay, I'd like for you to talk to me about your compensation plan. There's a difference between commission plan and compensation plan. Huge difference between the two. I've got something that will help you out with that in just a few minutes as well. But you should be talking about compensation plans, not commission plans. When they say commission, you need to say, I understand that you're focused on the commission part of this, but from a big picture standpoint, how about if we talk about the entire compensation plan instead of just one leg of it, which is the commission split? So what you're doing at that point is you're saying, hey, look, you've got something of low value. You have something that you like. It's your commission plan. It's not hard for me to get, right? I could call whoever. I could probably call your broker and get the plan, or go on their website or whatever. You've got something that you like that's lower value than something that I have. I have the way that my top agents, my top productive agents, I'm going to tell you how they generate business. I'm going to exchange something of high value for something of yours, which is low value, which is the way that I'm framing that. Okay. And then you're going to finish up with, do you have time for me to share this with you? Do you have time Tuesday for me to share this with you? So instead of me saying, hey, how about if we get together and have an appointment? How about if we, do you want to interview, anything along that line? All you're saying at this point is, those things that are high value, How about if I share those high value things with you? And so that's what you're actually asking for. And you're asking on a specific day. Okay. Now there's a lot of times when having, a choice between things is a good time. In this situation, I would think it would be better to just say, how's Tuesday afternoon? How's Tuesday afternoon work for you? Can I share it with you then? Okay. So let me go back through this. Let me go back through this one time in case you're writing some of this down. So thank you for your candidness, especially when it comes to something as important as your take-home pay. Just like you as an agent in the market, just like you as an agent in the marketplace, my company being as competitive as possible is critical. Since you're happy where you are, and I'd never ask you to make a financial decision that would negatively impact your family, I'll tell you what, if you spend 10 minutes sharing with me why you love your compensation plan, I'll tell you the top 3 ways that my productive agents generate leads. Do you have time on Tuesday for me to share that with you? So this doesn't matter whether they're saying, your per transaction fee is too high, or your monthly fee is too high, or your whatever. All of those budget items fall under this dialogue or this script. Now, I would suggest to start with that you learn the script. As you learn the script, there's going to be some things that you talk through that you're like, hey, I really like this. I'd rather use the dialogue. If you're already really familiar with this or really comfortable with it, or if you used BANT before and you're familiar with the 11 objections, then maybe you want to go straight to using the dialogue. But I would try the script first just to make sure that I'm comfortable with it. And then really quickly, because you as a broker are good at this already, it's going to be easy for you to transition into that other direction with that dialogue. Okay. So is there any questions about that, Ben? Can you check and see if we have any questions about it?
No questions, but a lot of good comments. People get good stuff out of it.
Good. Love it. Okay. So the next slide. So my split is better. Whenever we talk through this, if you want to take just a second, these are the ones that we just, this is what we just discussed just a second ago. So from a budget standpoint, thank you, compare, don't contrast, not asking for a decision, trade their low value with your high value. Whether anything that falls into that financial budget category, you're going to be able to use this objection handler with this. Okay. All right. So the next thing I promised we would make sure that we hit on today is so a lot of you, right? You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your system, right? So from James Clear, Atomic Habits. So there are some things that I want to make sure that we talk about, that if you handle these this way, it's going to reduce or eliminate a lot of your objections. Okay. And so, whenever it comes to having a conversation with an agent about anything that has to do with their business, there's four main pillars in their business as a real estate agent. Everything falls under these 4 categories. One is leads, one is cost revenue, and the second one's cost revenue expenses. The third one is training and development, and the fourth one is culture. Okay, I'll circle back to all those in just a second. Recruiting has 4 stages to it. 4 stages are the appointment, the interview, the post-interview, and the onboarding. Okay. Yes, onboarding is absolutely part of your recruiting process. We're going to talk about that in just a second too. But here's what I wanted to make sure that we dug into first, because this is going to help you with both of the other 4. You have to understand and focus on, through everything that you're doing with them, on what value you bring to their business. You have to meet them where they are. If you get into the habit of meeting them where they are, you're going to find that you run into less objections. You're going to find that there's things that happen with you and your interview, or you and the content that you put out, or you and the letters that you send out, or you and the handwritten notes that you send out, or you and the text messages, or whatever it is that you do. You're going to find that if those are focused on value that meets the agent where they are and helps them understand how you'll impact their business, you're going to run into less objections. And what you're going to notice is that attraction that we started the conversation with, that way that you rent space in their head, the way that you stay in their head is the ultimate choice for them before they've made a decision to go to another brokerage. If you stay focused on that one thing, it's going to allow everything else to happen the way that it's supposed to, and it's going to make your recruiting job easier. So let's talk about the 4 business pillars for just a second. Okay, we're not going to we're not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on this today. There's other information that we have out there if you're interested in that. But so the 4 business pillars are leads, cost, revenue, expenses, training and development, and culture. So whether you went to Wharton's or Harvard or Stanford School of Business or wherever you went to business school, they say that real estate and every other company breaks down into 4 main categories. How a company operates: it's sales, it's marketing, it's finance, and then it's the compliance or procedural portion. Okay, if you say that to a real estate agent, they're going to fall asleep on you. Okay, that's just the way that it is. However, what I did is I took that philosophy and I broke it down into these business pillars, and I said, okay, what is everything that happens from a real estate standpoint that an agent needs to be focused on? And that breaks down into those 4 categories that you see on your screen right now. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about each of them for just a second, because they help you overcome objections if you know how to explain them in your conversations. That's why it's important for us to talk about this, especially when it comes to objections. So the leads, the truth is agents do not want leads. They want transactions. They want closings. That's what they want. Okay. However, the vernacular, the vocabulary that they're used to is hearing the word leads. They aren't trained that leads are what they want. And the reality is, you as the broker should help them understand it's not a bunch of leads that they want. It is a bunch of closings that they want. It is a bunch of transactions that they want. So you have to be able to have that part of the conversation with them. Now, the second one is cost, revenue, and expenses. So cost, the way to break this down is ordinary business cost. Okay. Those are the things they have to do to stay in business. Revenue, we all know what revenue is. And then expenses. Expenses are the choices they make financially. Your job as a broker is to help them understand the difference between cost and expenses. Your job is to also help them understand how you help them cover those things and how you can make sure that they make enough revenue. So being with you reduces their ordinary cost and helps them offset their expenses. When you can do that, you're going to run into less budget questions whenever it comes to your BANT methodology of overcoming objections. The third one is training and development or business development. So keep in mind, when you're talking to agents, new agents like and appreciate the word training. Experienced agents do not. So new agents focus on training because they know that there's certain things that need to happen, and it has a connotation to them that they accept, that they know that that's part of what it is that they need in order for them to excel in their business. Business development is what it turns into as people become more experienced. And so you have to, in your conversations with people when you're recruiting, you have to make sure you transition your vocabulary. If you talk to very experienced agents about all the training that you do, you're turning them off. If you talk to them about the business development that you help them with, then that is more the language and the vocabulary that they want to hear. All of these things together, all these little things add up to culture. Culture, of course, is all the little things that you and the people on your team do on a daily basis. That's what culture is. And so if you're focusing on the leads conversation the right way, and the cost, revenue, expenses the right way, and the training and business development the right way, that creates the culture that you want. That's going to help you attract more of those agents. Now, how do you have that conversation with agents once they're in that recruiting loop with you? Well, first of all, you have an appointment. An appointment, the best way to explain that, the appointment is the reservation to eat at the restaurant. The interview is you sitting down and having the steak. The truth is, a lot of people could make the appointment for you. The reality is, you're going to be the one sitting down eating the steak. Don't confuse the two of those, and don't act like the two of those are the same thing. There's completely separate processes for how those work. I know that seems very elementary, but in the day-to-day practice of things, we start commingling those things and not having them as separate systems that we use, and then we end up blending them together in a way that is not an advantage for us when it comes to recruiting. So appointment is the first step. The interview is the second step. The interview has 4 parts to it. We'll talk about that some other time. Then there's post-interview. Your post-interview follow-up, how you do that, whether they showed up or not, has to be systemized, and it has to deliver information to them in a way that is general information and specific information. So we want to make sure that both of those are happening. And then, of course, onboarding. Onboarding is the finalization and the delivery of the promises made through the rest of the process. Now, that doesn't mean that whenever you sit down in onboarding, everything that you said was going to happen has to happen by that day. However, they have to feel assured on onboarding day, whatever day that is, that everything you said was going to happen. They have to feel assured that it is going to happen on onboarding day. If you do that, recruiting becomes easier for you. Because if that's what's happening, it's very easy for you to sit there and have a conversation with them and say, I really appreciate you coming on board with this. Do you know any other agents that would benefit from this? At that point, if everything else has went smoothly, the way that we talked about, it's very easy for them to say, oh, yes, well, this person, this one, and this one. And then there's a way that you can actually get them involved as they onboard to help you bring in new people. Okay. Now, if you have those things in place and you have systems for all of that, and your focus is to bring value to them, don't you see how that's going to help you not have to deal with a lot of the objections? Because what's going to happen is your conversation, as you move through things, it's going to stop the things that normally would have come up that would allow people to feel like they're not comfortable with something, and would make them feel like they have to give some type of objection. And we haven't talked about this today, but we do have some information about it. There's a big difference between an objection and a condition. Okay. And so what we want to make sure that we're doing is working through the process in a very systemized way like this, so it eliminates those objections and identifies any conditions that they may have. That way we can also handle those. Those conditions. Okay. So, so there's some resources in front of you. Okay. So we did a 3-part series with Loop a while back. So we have some lead magnets and retention stuff that we give through Brokerpreneur Not So Secret Society. If you want to learn more about growing teams, we actually did an event called an Excite event. We've got a replay of our commission split versus compensation plan. I mentioned that I noted a little bit earlier in the conversation. And then if you want to find out how to automate your recruiting, of course, click the thing in the center and spend 10 minutes with me, and I can show you how to automate a lot of the processes that we just talked about. So that way you can focus on being the broker that you want to, the broker you want and need to be for your agents, instead of trying to figure out that systemization that we've talked about a couple of times. Ben, was there anything in the chat? Was there any questions?
All good. Just good comments.
Good. I love it. Well, so we're gonna wrap up for the day. If there's no questions, I will say this: every Friday we have Brokerpreneur Not So Secret Society, absolutely free. It's for our clients, and also we have our podcast guest listeners, webinar listeners, people that have downloaded things from our site. All kinds of different people come in. They all collaborate. It's brokers from across the country. We always bring a topic. But the first thing we do whenever we get in there, we kind of check in with everybody, see how the market's going. And then right after that, we ask them what's going on in their business. And a lot of times they bring up things, and we spend the next hour getting feedback from each other in the group. We give some feedback and insight from a brokerpreneur standpoint. And of course, they give some insight on what they're dealing with on the problems and issues and wins that they're having. And so all of that collectively turns into almost like an open mic Friday is the best way to explain it. Every Friday at 12 o'clock Eastern time. If you're interested, it's the one that says lead magnets for retention, because of course we have flyers and handouts whenever we do that on Fridays. Just click on that. You can register for that. We'll send you a reminder, 2 reminders on Friday morning. You can sign up for that if you want to sign up for that. And Ben, is there anything else that I need to review? Do we want to talk about Bob Berg for just a second?
Yeah, sure. Let's talk about Bob tomorrow.
Okay, so many of you have heard of the series of books, The Go-Giver, with Bob Berg and John David Mann. And Bob just recently wrote another book with a gentleman, Jeff West. If you haven't ever met Jeff West, he's absolutely incredible. One of our podcasts you can go back and listen to. He's an incredible guy. The two of them co-wrote a book together, Streetwise to Saleswise. An absolutely incredible book. We've twisted their arm, I would say. They're going to be on Brokers Open Podcast live tomorrow, BOP live tomorrow. And so that is every Thursday at 12 o'clock. We have a mastermind with real estate agents from across the country. If you or your agents or recruits that you're talking to want to attend this, just really quick, if you would just put your name in the chat or whatever, and Ben can get that to you, or maybe Ben can put it in the chat.
Just put the link in the chat.
Yeah, he just put the link in the chat. If you want to register for that, there's no cost. Everything is completely worked out. All you have to do is put your name in there, register for it. You can use that and share it with your agents, or like we said, recruits. We'd love to see you in there. It'll be a good time, and you'll get reminders. As a matter of fact, every Thursday, because we have different guests. We talk about next week, next 3 weeks, we're going to be talking about how to convert more listings by dealing with sellers and getting more referrals from them. So we've got a lot of great stuff going on Thursdays for you and your agents and the recruits that you're talking to as well. So if you've got any questions about any of this, of course, reach out to us. We're happy to help however we can. Take just a second, click on whatever QR code is the one that is the most beneficial for you and your business. And if you have questions, we're here to answer. We love to help however we can help. It's a big part of what we say on all of our podcasts if you listen to it, right, Ben?
That's exactly right.
What it boils down to is we just want to be part of your win.